When my father died, I expected grief. I expected long nights, silent mornings, and that hollow ache you feel when someone you love just isn't there anymore. What I didn't expect was betrayal, not from strangers, from my own family. You know, people always say death brings families closer. That's not what happened to mine, not even close. The day everything shifted, I remember standing outside my childhood home, the cold air biting my skin through my jacket. My palms were sweaty despite the chill. I had this knot in my stomach that refused to untangle. Something felt off, but I couldn't name it. Inside, behind those walls, my siblings were laughing, and I wasn't invited. My name's Emily. I'm 33, and up until that moment, I thought I had at least some place in my family. I was never the golden child, not like Rachel, my older sister, who always had this magnetic pull that made people listen, or Daniel, my younger brother, who played it safe and stayed quiet, which somehow kept him on everyone's good side. I was the one who left, the one who didn't follow the rules, the one who walked her own path and paid for it. But Dad was different. With him, I didn't have to explain myself. I could just be. And near the end, when he got sick, I came back. I dropped everything, left my apartment and my job in the city, and moved back in to take care of him. And I don't regret a second of it. Those last months with him, they were slow, painful, beautiful. Some mornings he couldn't talk, and other days he wouldn't stop. He'd tell me stories from his childhood, how he met Mom, how scared he was when Rachel was born because he didn't know how to be a father yet, and he'd smile when he talked about me, how I surprised him, how I saw the world differently. There was this moment, I remember it so clearly, when we were sitting on the back porch, just listening to the wind rustle through the trees. He turned to me, his voice hoarse, and said, "Emily, there's something I need you to keep safe. Promise me, okay?" He handed me a small, sealed envelope. It was heavy in my hand, like it carried something more than just paper. I asked him what it was, but he just gave me this soft, tired smile. "Just, when the time comes, give it to Mr. Halbert." That was our lawyer. I kept that envelope, tucked it away in the drawer next to my bed. I never opened it. I never even thought about it again, because back then, I was still hoping he'd get better. I wasn't ready to think about goodbyes. And then, he was gone. No dramatic ending, just one quiet night he closed his eyes and never opened them again. I sat there holding his hand long after the nurse had confirmed it, trying to feel something, anything, but I was numb. I thought the hardest part of losing my dad would be the silence he left behind, but it wasn't. It was the noise I heard days later, coming from the house. Rachel's voice, sharp and mocking, floating out through the open window as I stood frozen on the porch. "She doesn't deserve a dime," she said, laughing. "Finally, we got everything." Everything. My throat tightened, my hands shook. My heart, it didn't break, it collapsed. I wasn't just grieving anymore. Now I was angry. And as I took a step forward, something shifted inside me. I wasn't walking into that house as the forgotten sister anymore. Because in my pocket was that envelope? And what was inside? It was going to change everything. I remember stepping into that house, my childhood home, and realizing how unfamiliar it felt. It smelled the same, that mix of old wood, faint coffee, and the lavender potpourri my mom used to scatter in every corner. But something about it was colder, sharper, like it wasn't mine anymore, like I'd been erased. Rachel and Daniel were in the living room, casually lounging on the couches like they hadn't just buried our father 2 weeks ago. Their wine glasses clinked as they toasted to something I wasn't supposed to hear, something I'll never forget. "She doesn't deserve a dime." That voice, Rachel's, sliced right through me. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. She didn't hug me then, barely even looked at me. I figured grief made people distant, but now I saw it for what it really was. She wasn't grieving, she was celebrating. I stepped back quietly, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted to escape. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing I heard them. Not yet. Instead, I slipped out and drove. Nowhere in particular, just away, trying to breathe, trying to think. My mind kept circling the same question. Why? Why didn't they invite me to the will reading? Why was I suddenly invisible? Why was I being treated like I didn't belong in a family I sacrificed so much for? But deep down, I already knew. I'd always been the outsider. Growing up, Rachel was the star. Straight A's, prom queen, debate captain, mom's pride and joy. Daniel was the peacemaker. He was quiet, agreeable, always knew when to nod and stay out of trouble. And then there was me. I was different. I liked books more than people. Questioned things that weren't supposed to be questioned. I didn't chase the spotlight, and maybe that made me easy to overlook, or maybe that made me a threat. Rachel hated that Dad and I were close. I could see it in her eyes whenever he chose me to run errands with him or asked me to help in the garage. She'd plaster on that smile, but her jaw would tighten. Her compliments always had a little sting hidden inside. "You're so practical, Emily," she'd say. "It's cute how content you are with simple things." I used to wonder if I was imagining it, if maybe I was just too sensitive. But after that day, hearing her say those words, "She doesn't deserve a dime," I realized it was never in my head. It was real, and it had always been there. The truth is, when Dad got sick, nobody else stepped up. Rachel was too busy. "Important meetings," she said. Daniel would come around sometimes, but it was always quick. Drop off soup, send flowers, and leave before the silence got too heavy. But I stayed. I cooked his meals, sat with him when the pain kept him up at night. I held his hand when he couldn't form words anymore. I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because I loved him. And he knew that. That's why he gave me the envelope. That night, after the shock wore off and the anger settled into something sharper, determination, I pulled it from my drawer. My hands trembled as I opened it, my breath catching when I saw the bold legal header, Last Will and Testament of William J. Clark. The date caught my eye first. It was signed 3 weeks before he passed. My pulse quickened. This wasn't the same will Rachel and Daniel had seen. This one looked new. I ran my fingers over his signature. It was real. It was him, and it meant something had changed. I didn't know what was coming, not yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. I must have read that will a dozen times that night. Every word, every clause, every signature. It wasn't just a copy. It was official. Stamped, notarized, witnessed. My father hadn't just scribbled something down on his deathbed. He had planned this, thought it through, had it filed properly, and most importantly, he'd kept it from everyone else. Everyone but me. I didn't sleep. I just sat there in my childhood bedroom, the same pale blue walls, the same crack in the ceiling I used to stare at when I couldn't fall asleep as a kid. Only now, that room didn't feel safe. It felt like a vault of secrets, and I was the only one who had the key. The next morning, I took the will to Mr. Halberd, our longtime family lawyer. He was surprised to see me, clearly hadn't expected me to show up. His expression shifted the moment I handed him the envelope. He opened it carefully, adjusting his glasses as he scanned the pages. I watched him like a hawk, every breath tight in my chest. Then he looked up, eyes wide. This is dated after the one I read with your siblings," he said quietly. "This changes a lot." That one sentence felt like a shot of electricity. He asked me where I got it. I told him the truth, that Dad had given it to me, just in case, that I hadn't even known what it was until last night. Mr. Halberd nodded slowly, as if things were finally clicking into place. And then he said something I'll never forget. "Emily, this is the valid will." My ears were ringing. All that guilt I had carried, thinking maybe I wasn't supposed to be included, that maybe I had done something wrong, vanished, replaced by clarity, by anger, by fire. They tried to shut me out, but Dad hadn't. He made sure I had what I needed. He knew how they'd twist things. He knew Rachel. And now I had something stronger than revenge. I had truth. Later that day, I got a call from Daniel. Not Rachel. Never Rachel. Just Daniel doing what he always did. Damage control. His voice was tense, like he was trying to sound casual, but couldn't quite pull it off. "Hey, just checking in. We're finalizing some stuff with the estate today. Rachel thought it might be better if you didn't come." I could practically see him scratching his neck, avoiding eye contact even through the phone. Better if I didn't come? That was their plan, erase me, quietly, pretend I was never there. I forced a smile he couldn't see. "No worries," I said calmly. "You guys go ahead. I'll see you soon." My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control, not out of spite, but out of something deeper, something righteous. They were meeting at the house, Dad's house, for the final signatures. The last step before Rachel could claim control of everything, the accounts, the land, the family business. She must have thought she'd won, that her lies had been sealed with a lawyer's stamp. But she didn't know what I had. She didn't know the truth was about to walk through that front door. As I pulled into the driveway, I could see them through the window, Rachel pacing, animated. Daniel hunched over the papers, pen in hand, Mr. Halberd sitting stiffly on the couch. I took a deep breath, slipped the will into my coat pocket. My fingers were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from something that felt dangerously close to justice. And then I opened the door. The air inside the house was thick, tense, charged, like it was holding its breath. Rachel was mid-sentence when the door clicked shut behind me. Her voice faltered. The moment she saw me standing there, her eyes narrowed and her lips pressed into that familiar, condescending smile, like I was some stray dog that had wandered into the wrong yard. "Well," she said, barely concealing her annoyance, "this is awkward." Daniel looked up from the coffee table where the final estate documents were neatly stacked. His eyes darted from me to Rachel, then back again. He didn't say anything. Of course he didn't. But Mr. Halberd? He stood. His gaze landed on the inside pocket of my coat, like he knew what I'd brought with me. His jaw tightened slightly, and for a split second I saw something in his face. Relief. Maybe even respect. Rachel scoffed. "You weren't invited, Emily." I smiled, slow and deliberate, like someone who finally had a winning hand. "Yeah," I said. "I figured that out when I heard you say I didn't deserve a dime." Her jaw twitched. "You were eavesdropping?" I took a few steps forward and laid the thick envelope gently on the table, right on top of their precious stack of paperwork. "No," I said calmly. "I was grieving. But I'm done with that now." Daniel finally spoke, his voice uncertain. What is that?" I looked directly at Rachel when I answered. "Dad's real will." The silence that followed felt endless. Rachel laughed, a sharp, forced sound that rang too loud in the stillness. "This is pathetic," she snapped. "You expect anyone to believe you just found a second will out of nowhere?" She turned to Mr. Halberd, expecting him to back her up, but he didn't. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and picked up the envelope with practiced care. "Actually," he said, "Emily brought this to me earlier today. It's dated 3 weeks before your father passed. Witnessed, notarized." Rachel's face went pale. Her smirk vanished, and for once she had nothing to say. Daniel leaned forward, squinting at the signature. "Wait, that's really his handwriting?" Mr. Halberd nodded. "I've already verified its authenticity. Legally, this will supersede the one we reviewed last week." Rachel stood frozen. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked like she might scream or cry. Maybe both. But I just stood there, watching her. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I was done. This was never about money for me. It was about being silenced, excluded, treated like I didn't matter. About watching them turn grief into greed and deciding I wouldn't let them rewrite the story my father left behind. Mr. Halberd began reading the new will aloud, and as his voice echoed through the room, I saw Rachel begin to unravel. 80% of the estate is to be transferred to Emily Clark. She gripped the back of the chair like she needed to steady herself. Daniel looked too stunned to move. "The remaining portion is to be held in a trust, with Emily as executor, to be distributed at her discretion." Rachel's eyes shot toward me, wide and panicked. "You can't do this." But her voice sounded hollow now, like even she knew she'd already lost. I met her gaze. I didn't do anything. Dad did. And in that moment I realized this wasn't revenge. It was justice. There was something strange about the way time moved in that moment. Everything slowed down. I stood there, watching Rachel as the words from the will settled in the room like ash. No one said anything. No one could. It was like we were all frozen, caught between disbelief and recognition. It was real. My father had chosen me. Mr. Halberd cleared his throat again, his voice even but firm, continuing to read aloud. I, William J. Clark, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all prior wills and testaments. Rachel's hand shot up. Wait, her voice cracked like glass under pressure. This isn't right. He told me I'd be in charge. He promised. Her eyes were wild now. She wasn't performing anymore. She wasn't composed. She was unraveling. You must have forged this. There's no way he changed it. Not without telling me. I stayed quiet. Let her flail. Mr. Halberd didn't flinch. The signature matches all legal records. It's been verified, Miss Clark. Daniel finally spoke. I didn't know he was planning to change anything. He looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe he'd always thought I was weaker, quieter, easier to ignore. But not now. Now I had their full attention. And none of it felt like a victory. It felt like truth, raw and heavy, finally speaking louder than all the manipulation that had come before it. Rachel turned to me, voice low, venomous. You planned this. You played the sweet, loyal daughter while stabbing us in the back. I felt my breath catch for a second, not out of guilt, but from the sheer absurdity of it. She still didn't get it. You weren't stabbed, I said quietly. You were seen for who you are. Finally. Her lips curled. Dad didn't even like confrontation. He wouldn't do this to me. Not unless someone pushed him. I stepped closer, my voice calm but cutting. Dad watched you show up late, leave early, roll your eyes when he needed help to the bathroom. He heard you joke about inheritance while he was dying, Rachel. You did this. You gave him every reason to change his mind. The room was dead silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause. And then, Mr. Halberd reached into his briefcase and pulled out a letter. One more thing, he said. Your father asked me to give this to Emily when the will was read. He handed it to me gently. My hands trembled as I unfolded the page. My father's handwriting, shaky but still familiar, stretched across the paper in blue ink. Emily, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you were brave enough to do what I couldn't. You were always the one who stayed when no one else did. You never asked for anything, but I want you to have everything I can give you, not because of blood or obligation, because you earned it, and because I trust you to make it mean something. Love always, Dad. I didn't realize I was crying until the tear dropped onto the signature at the bottom of the letter. For a moment, no one moved. Rachel sat down, defeated. Daniel looked like he was about to speak, but didn't. There was nothing left to say. The truth had landed. The story was no longer theirs to twist. It was mine. And my father had made sure it stayed that way. After that day, everything changed. But not in the way I expected. Rachel tried to fight it. Of course she did. She filed a challenge to the will, dragged us through legal motions, desperate to prove it was fake. But she didn't win. She couldn't. The truth was too solid, too real. Eventually, even her lawyer advised her to drop it. Daniel sent me an email a few weeks later, short, awkward, but honest. He said he didn't know the will had been changed, that he wasn't part of Rachel's plan to exclude me, that he was sorry. I believed him. Not because I trusted him completely, but because I think guilt has a way of waking people up. We don't speak much now, but sometimes he checks in. He even visited the house once, not to claim anything, just to sit with me in the kitchen and talk about Dad. It was quiet. It was uncomfortable. But it was something. Rachel, on the other hand, disappeared. She packed up and left town. No apology, no calls, not even a text. I haven't heard from her since the court ruled in my favor. Part of me still waits for the next dramatic move, the next letter, the next explosion. But honestly, part of me hopes I never hear her voice again. It's strange, though. I thought getting the inheritance would feel like winning. It didn't. Don't get me wrong. Dad left me enough to change my life. The house, the business, the savings. I could have sold it all, started over. I thought about it more than once, but every time I stood at the front door, keys in my hand, ready to walk away, I couldn't. Because this house, this land, this was my father's legacy, and now it was mine. So instead, I stayed. I renovated the house slowly, room by room. I planted a garden where he used to sit on the porch. I turned his old workshop into a community space for local artists, something he always wanted but never got around to doing. And I set up a scholarship in his name for kids who feel invisible, kids like I used to be. Because that's the thing no one talks about when it comes to inheritance. It's not just about money or property. It's about what you do with it, how you carry it forward, how you make it matter. I didn't fight Rachel for revenge. I fought for the truth, because when someone you love dies, the last thing you want is for their memory to be twisted into something ugly. My dad wasn't perfect, but he was kind, and he believed in me when no one else did. That second will wasn't just a document. It was a message. You mattered. You were seen. You were enough. And if I've learned anything through all of this, it's that being the quiet one, the one who doesn't demand attention, doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes, we're just the ones waiting for the right moment to be heard. So to anyone who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, pushed aside by the people who were supposed to love you the most, I see you, and I hope you know your voice, your worth, your truth. It matters. Because in the end, silence isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's just the calm before everything changes. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, know that you're not alone. Sometimes it's not the loudest voice in the room that carries the truth. It's the quiet one, the patient one, the one who never gave up. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true stories just like this one. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? I still remember the exact moment I opened that box. It was satin covered, tied with a perfect silver ribbon, sitting neatly on the hotel bed. My name was written on a small ivory tag, Emily. My hands trembled as I reached for it, my chest fluttering with nervous excitement. I told myself, maybe they're finally taking me seriously. Maybe I finally belong. But the second I lifted the lid, my heart sank. Inside wasn't the dusty rose bridesmaid gown the others were wearing. It was black, stiff, cheap. A maid's uniform, complete with white gloves and a frilly apron. At first I thought it was a joke. I let out this awkward little laugh, looking around the room for someone to say, "Surprise!" But no one did. Then I heard the click of heels. Aunt Karen, the bride's mother, walked in with that smug little smile she always wore when she was about to say something cruel. Her eyes swept over me, and without missing a beat, she said, "You should stick to your real talent, sweetheart, cleaning." She leaned in close, the scent of her expensive perfume suffocating, and whispered it again, slower this time. Cleaning. I felt like I'd been slapped. My face burned, my throat tightened, and I could feel my eyes starting to sting. But I didn't let a single tear fall, not in front of her. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't real. It was one of those tight, polite smiles you force when you're holding back everything you actually want to say. I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. It's thoughtful." But inside, I was screaming. Why would she do this? Why now? Why humiliate me in front of everyone? I'd been nothing but kind, supportive. I showed up early, helped organize the stupid seating chart, even ran out to buy emergency hairspray for Sophia the day before. And speaking of Sophia, my cousin, the bride, she stood in the doorway just watching. Her perfect blonde hair curled, makeup flawless, veil pinned in place. She didn't say a word. Her eyes met mine for a moment. I searched them for something. Regret. Sympathy. Anything. But she just looked away, like I was invisible. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the box still in my lap. The fabric of the maid's dress felt rough against my fingertips. I remember the way the room felt suddenly colder. The laughter from the hallway outside, the other bridesmaids getting ready, was muffled, distant, like I wasn't even part of it. I should leave, I thought. Just grab my stuff and go. Who cares if it's her wedding? She clearly doesn't care about me. But then I thought of Grandma, her fragile smile when she told me how proud she was that I was part of the wedding, how she said, "You're going to look so beautiful walking down that aisle." She didn't have many days left. I didn't want to disappoint her. So, I stayed. I folded the dress neatly and closed the box. My heart still ached, but I held my head high as I stepped out into the hallway. Olivia, my best friend and the only reason I hadn't completely lost it, was waiting outside. Her eyes widened the moment she saw my face. "Em, what happened?" I showed her the box. Her mouth dropped open. "They didn't." I nodded. That was the moment everything changed. Because I didn't just want to survive that weekend anymore. I wanted to remember it. I wanted them to remember it. And they would. Because that dress, that moment, that was the last time they'd ever make me feel small. Next time, I'd be the one holding the box. And inside it would be something they'd never forget. 2 weeks before the wedding, I got the call. It was Sophia's voice, sugary sweet and almost too casual. "Hey, Em." "So?" "I've been thinking, and I'd love for you to be a bridesmaid. I mean, what's a wedding without family, right?" My first instinct was shock. We hadn't been close in years. Ever since college, Sophia had become, well, different. Money changed her. Private jets, designer bags, champagne brunches, it all became normal for her. Meanwhile, I was painting in a studio apartment the size of a closet, scraping by on commissions and leftover ramen. Still, I said yes. I wanted to believe it meant something. Maybe she missed me. Maybe, beneath the designer exterior, the cousin I used to play dress-up with was still in there. I told my mom about the call, and her eyes lit up. "That's wonderful, Emily. You'll be stunning up there. Show them what real grace looks like." Even she knew the family politics, though she rarely talked about them. The day I arrived at the estate, it was like stepping into another world. Tall white columns framed the massive front porch. A fountain gurgled beside the driveway, and fairy lights were already being strung through the garden trees. Even in the daylight, everything looked like a movie set. Sophia greeted me at the door with a distant hug, all arms and no warmth. "Oh my God, you made it!" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Aunt Karen was close behind her, dressed in pastel silk and pearls, clutching a champagne flute like it was part of her hand. I could feel them sizing me up the second I walked in. My suitcase had a scuff mark. My sneakers weren't trendy. I'd brought my own snacks in a Ziploc bag because I didn't want to impose. "Emily," Aunt Karen said, her tone dripping with fake affection, "we're just thrilled to have you. You're going to make this weekend so memorable." Looking back, she wasn't lying, just not in the way I thought. Inside, the estate was everything I'd expected. Marble floors, chandeliers, tall arched windows. The bridesmaids were already there, all of them effortlessly beautiful, dressed in silk robes with embroidered names on the back. "Team Bride," one said with a little tiara doodle. I noticed something then. There were only 5 robes and 5 gift boxes stacked on the vanity, but Sophia had 6 bridesmaids. I brushed it off. Maybe mine was somewhere else. Maybe someone forgot. I wasn't going to overthink it, but even then, I felt it. That twinge in my gut. That quiet little voice whispering, "You don't belong here. You're a guest in their world." That night, I couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet. I stared at the ceiling and tried to push away the anxiety, the old insecurity that always crept in when I was around this side of the family. I remembered being 13 at Thanksgiving, wearing a secondhand dress, and overhearing Aunt Karen telling my mom, "She's got potential, if only she learned to brush her hair properly." I had smiled through dinner anyway, and now, years later, here I was, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I had earned their respect. Maybe they'd see me not as the poor cousin, not as the help, but as someone who had value, someone worth standing beside them. I didn't know it then, but the weekend ahead would burn those hopes to the ground, because in that house full of money, lies, and secrets, I was about to find something more valuable than their approval. I was about to find the truth, and once I did, there'd be no going back. Not for me, not for Sophia, and definitely not for Aunt Karen. The morning of the rehearsal dinner, everything changed. The sun filtered in through sheer white curtains, and for a few brief seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the silk boxes lined up on the vanity, the pastel chaos of curling irons, lipstick, and chaos. And I remembered Sophia's wedding. A weekend I dreamed of feeling included, wanted, even loved. I walked over to the gift boxes, heart racing a little. My name was finally written in gold script on one of them. Maybe the awkwardness yesterday was just in my head. Maybe everything was about to feel normal. I untied the ribbon and opened it slowly, feeling Olivia peeking over my shoulder with a grin. But when the lid came off, that grin disappeared. Inside, instead of the rose-colored bridesmaid gown I'd seen on the others, there was a stiff black and white outfit. I pulled it out slowly, my fingers catching on the scratchy apron. It wasn't a joke. It was a maid's uniform, not a cute little robe with Team Bride stitched on the back, not a heartfelt letter or a gift bag, just polyester and humiliation. Before I could process it, I heard heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Aunt Karen. She took one look at the outfit dangling from my hand and smirked. "Fitting, isn't it?" she said smoothly, sipping from her mimosa like this was a Tuesday. "You've always been so good with cleaning, Emily. We thought we'd let you do what you do best." She walked right past me without waiting for a response, like she hadn't just taken a knife and twisted it. I froze. My skin went cold. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Why would she do this? What did I ever do to her? Then I turned to Sophia, hoping, begging for some kind of defense. But she just stood there, eyes on her phone, pretending not to notice. My throat burned. I felt Olivia put a hand on my shoulder. Her voice was tight with anger. "You don't have to take this, Em." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear that stupid dress in half, throw it at their feet, and walk out with my dignity intact. But then I thought of Grandma. Her voice in my head, soft, loving, saying, "Show them your strength, baby, not your anger." So I swallowed my pride. Again. I looked Aunt Karen straight in the eyes, forcing a smile even though every muscle in my face ached from the effort. "Thank you," I said, my voice calm. "This is going to be unforgettable." And I meant it. Later that evening, while the rest of the bridesmaids giggled over champagne and practiced their speeches, I wandered the hallways, trying to breathe. That's when I saw something strange. Sophia, in the wine cellar, whispering to someone. At first I thought it was Jake, her fiancé, but it wasn't. It was Nathan, Jake's best man. They were close. Too close. Sophia touched his arm, then his chest. She laughed a little too loud, then leaned in and kissed him. I ducked behind the wall, breath caught in my throat. Did I just see what I think I saw? I backed away, heart racing. Olivia nearly bumped into me in the hallway. "Em, what's wrong?" I grabbed her arm and pointed back toward the stairs. "Sophia, Nathan, she's cheating on Jake." Olivia's eyes widened. "You're sure?" I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. The maid's dress, the humiliation, the silence. Everything suddenly made sense. They thought I was weak, disposable, just the help. But now, I held their biggest secret, and I wasn't going to waste it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, the soft hum of the air conditioner, the only sound in the room. My thoughts raced like a thunderstorm. Flashes of Aunt Karen's smirk, Sophia's silence, and that kiss in the cellar all crackling through my mind. She really did it. She humiliated me. And she's cheating. And no one knew. No one except me and Olivia. I turned to look at her. She'd fallen asleep in the bed across from mine, one arm dangling off the edge, her breathing soft and steady. Earlier, when I told her everything, she didn't say, "Let it go or don't start drama." She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You know what they say about karma? Maybe it just needs a little help." That's when the idea was born. I whispered into the dark, what if we told everyone without ever saying a word? The next morning, over breakfast, I pitched the plan to Olivia. She leaned in closer with every word, eyes sparkling with adrenaline. "So, we put the photo inside the glasses. Not just any glasses," I said. "Color-changing cups. Like those ones from childhood that change color with temperature." I had seen them online, cups that reveal hidden messages or images when filled with cold water. Harmless, elegant, but absolutely devastating if used right. We'd take the photo Olivia snapped of Sophia and Nathan in the wine cellar, shrink it, and print dozens of tiny scrolls. We'd slide them into the lining of the cups, the part that changes color. When cold liquid hits it, the scroll inside would be revealed, floating there, crystal clear. No one would see it coming. No dramatic confrontations. No screaming matches. Just slow, painful realization washing over the crowd, one shocked guest at a time. Olivia pulled out her laptop and got to work like a woman on a mission. We'll need clear inkjet paper, the cups, waterproof scroll wrap, something to chill the drinks. I stared at her, grateful beyond words. You don't have to do this with me. She shrugged. Please, I live for chaos. Besides, you deserve a win. We spent that day prepping in secret, ducking in and out of supply stores in town, whispering behind closed doors, avoiding Aunt Karen's icy glares. At one point, Sophia caught me in the hallway and gave a half smile, like nothing had happened. I returned it with a nod. Smile, sweetheart, I thought. Tomorrow, everyone sees who you really are. That night, while the rest of the bridal party practiced their choreographed entrance for the reception, Olivia and I assembled everything. Scrolls were sealed. Cups were packed. We froze the drinks just enough to activate the color change at the perfect moment. I kept playing the scene over and over in my head, the guests sipping casually, the sudden pause, the whispers, the gasps, the silence, the scroll floating in the glass like a ghost, haunting, undeniable. I thought about Jake, the groom. He didn't deserve this. He seemed kind, polite, a little clueless maybe, but still. He deserved the truth, and I deserved justice. All my life, I'd been the one people looked over, the poor cousin, the one who didn't belong. Now I had power. Real, tangible, secret power. This wasn't just about the dress anymore. It was about respect, about showing them that kindness isn't weakness, and that just because someone is quiet doesn't mean they're blind. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that wedding as the help, but I'd leave as the storm they never saw coming. The day of the wedding arrived like a fairy tale. The sky was cloudless, the air smelled like blooming gardenias, and every surface of the estate shimmered with polished perfection. Photographers buzzed around, capturing laughter and lace, while classical music drifted from hidden speakers. And I was in the kitchen, holding a tray of drinks. Aunt Karen made sure I wasn't part of the bridal photos. She even snidely remarked, "We'll need someone to handle the serving, right?" While the other bridesmaids giggled, swirling champagne in crystal flutes. I nodded and took the tray. They didn't know what was coming. I walked calmly through the garden, the late afternoon sun casting golden light over the reception tables. Each place setting looked like it had been styled for a magazine cover. White roses, gold-rimmed china, personalized menus. And then there was me, in my tailor-made uniform, offering guests a special cooling mocktail to kick off the celebration. Each glass was chilled just enough, cold enough to trigger the reaction. Inside every translucent cup, tucked between the double walls of plastic, was the truth. A photograph of Sophia and Nathan locked in that kiss. The image was printed faintly in blue, invisible until the temperature dropped. Once the liquid touched it, it bloomed like ink in water. I watched as the first guest took a sip, then another. At first, nothing. Just idle chatter, clinking glasses, laughter. And then it started. A woman in a green dress stared at her cup, eyebrows knitting. She tilted it in the light, her face pale. Her husband leaned over, squinting. More people looked down. One by one, silence fell like dominoes. The whispers began, soft at first, then sharp and panicked. Is that? Wait, who is? Oh my God, is that Sophia? I kept moving, tray after tray, row after row. Then I heard the most satisfying sound of my life, the clink of a glass shattering. I turned just in time to see Jake, the groom, standing frozen. A cup slipped from his hand, blue liquid spreading like a crime scene on the white linen tablecloth. He was staring at his glass like it had betrayed him. His jaw clenched. His face had gone completely white. Sophia appeared from behind the archway of peonies, radiant in her gown, glowing with confidence, until she saw the sea of blue cups and the horrified faces around her. The color drained from her cheeks, too. She tried to laugh. "What's going on?" Jake didn't say a word. He just held up the cup. She walked closer, squinting. Then realization hit. Her eyes darted from the cup to the crowd, then to me. I held her gaze. No smile, no apology, just truth. She took a step back. "This is fake. It's someone photoshopped." Jake's voice cut her off. "It's not fake. I know that shirt. I wore that tie. That was yesterday." His voice cracked slightly, and for a second, I actually felt a pang of pity. But then I remembered how she stood there, saying nothing while I was humiliated, how she let her mother shame me, how she lied to Jake's face. Aunt Karen stormed over, grabbing my arm. "You little rat, you ruined everything." I calmly stepped away, lifting the edge of my skirt just slightly in a mock curtsy. Actually, I think I just cleaned up. Her face twisted with rage, but she couldn't say a word, because it was done. The truth was out, and for once in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking in the corner. I was the storm in the center of their perfect little day. The wedding ended in chaos. Guests whispered as they gathered their things, eyes flicking between Sophia, Jake, and the now infamous blue cups still littered across the reception tables. The music had stopped. The cake was never cut. The dance floor stayed empty. I watched from the garden steps, sipping water from my own cup. My hands were steady, my heart calmer than I expected. For once, I wasn't the mess they were cleaning up. Jake walked past me with his tie half undone, his eyes distant. He paused for a moment, looked at me, and said quietly, "Thank you." I didn't say anything, just gave him a small nod. He deserved the truth. And deep down, I think he knew it was never about revenge. It was about respect. For him. For me. Sophia never came to me. Not that day, not even afterward. But later that night, when most of the guests had cleared out and the fairy lights were still glowing over the abandoned reception, Olivia and I sat in the back of my car with the windows down, eating stale chips and replaying the moment everything unraveled. She tossed a handful into her mouth and laughed. "You really served the tea, literally." I smiled, finally letting the tension melt out of my shoulders. "Do you think I went too far?" She looked at me, serious now. "Number you went just far enough. They used shame as a weapon. You just gave it back, decorated in ribbon." It stuck with me, because for the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I didn't feel like the poor cousin or the girl they could mock without consequences. I felt powerful. Not because I embarrassed them, but because I stood up for myself without becoming like them. Word spread fast. By morning, there were already posts on social media. Someone had filmed Jake's reaction. The blue cup affair trended on TikTok under the hashtag #JewWeddingExposed. I didn't post anything, but people recognized me anyway. And the most unexpected thing? Support. Strangers DM'd me saying they'd gone through similar things, being treated like an outsider by their own family, being humiliated, underestimated. One girl wrote, "I watched that video and cried. I thought I was the only one." Another said, "You made me want to stand up for myself." That hit different. A few weeks later, Olivia and I turned the whole experience into something real. We launched an online shop, custom color-changing mugs and cups with empowering messages hidden inside. The first one we made together said, "She cleaned up, and they never saw her coming." It sold out in 24 hours. Funny how things flip, huh? Sophia moved out of state after the scandal. Aunt Karen's social circle iced her out, too. Turns out, no one wants a wedding planner whose own daughter became a meme. I heard she tried to claim I doctored the photos. But by then, it didn't matter. The truth had its own wings. As for me, I moved out of my tiny apartment, got a new studio with sunlight and real plants that didn't die every week. I paint again, not to survive, but to feel. And sometimes, when I get orders from clients who share stories about standing up for themselves, I think about that dress, that moment, that box, and I smile. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't ruining someone else's day. It's finally stepping into your own. And just like that, the maid became the main character. If you've ever been underestimated, remember, your silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Thanks for watching. Like if you felt that. Comment your favorite moment. Subscribe if you're done letting people walk all over you.